Chapter 3. Day ends in the killing pens. 2 days later he had finished for the day when Joe the butcher called him. The boy was sitting resting against a log, Rolga sprawled at his feet. The pup snored on his stomach. He set down the pup as he scrambled upright. "Give us a hand," Joe said when the boy stood close. "There's 2 sheep to kill, and my mate's gone to town. Ross told me to get hold of you. Said it'd be more experience." He steeled a knife as he spoke, slicking it up and down. For seconds the boy could not answer. The knife flickered brightly in front of him. When he finally said, "All right, but I'll be a minute. You can see I've got me dogs." Joe stopped the knife and slid it into a pouch. "Sure," he agreed. "I'm in no hurry. Come across to the pen when you're ready." Whistling softly, he walked toward the killing yards. Buckled by straps, the pouch swung from his belt. On his way to the shed, the boy felt heavy-footed. His boots seemed to stub in the dust. Rolga paced at his heels, and the pup bounced and capered, but he barely noticed. He shut them in the shed, then detoured toward the killing pens. "So here it is," he thought, "and I can't dodge it. I've never wanted to help, but now I have to. There'd be a laugh if I didn't. They kill 'em every day and think nothing of it. And the funny thing is, I'm as bad. I like the chops and meat." At the pens, Joe had 2 trussed sheep on the ground. A knife again flickered in his hand. "Get some water," he grunted, "from the tap over there. Then wash down, quick and smart like." Bent over, he forced back a sheep's head until its neck stretched smooth and unwrinkled. The animal bleated softly, muffled by his hand, then suddenly was dead. Blood welled from its gaping throat. Joe reached to grasp the other one. Blurry-eyed, the boy turned away to clutch a bucket. The iron handle gave him something to grip, and when the water ran, he let it splash to overflowing. Wet to his knees, he sloshed water helter-skelter, then scrubbed with a big, heavy broom. Blood flowed in the smoother he swept down a drain. Doubled over the sheep, Joe stared in surprise. "Hey," he said, "you're drowning a man. Just swill it quietly. We'll scrub down afterwards." Deft-handed and sure, he slit and thumbed the skins, pushing them away from the carcasses. Before straightening, he cut then broke all leg knuckles. Stretched on their spread-out skins, the 2 sheep were ready for hoisting. From near the tap, the boy watched Joe steal a knife. When it gleamed razor-edged, he jabbed it into a carcass and left it standing there. "All right," he said with a nod. "Give us a hand on the rope. I'll finish 'em when they're hanging." Together with the boy's shoulder rubbing Joe's sweaty bulk, they hauled up the sheep. There were 2 sets of gallows, one for sheep, one for cattle. When Joe finally finished with the carcasses, 2 bloody skins and a heap of intestines slithered on the ground. Joe slashed with his knife until the punches were empty. "Wash 'em," he told the boy, "and feed the dogs. There's a barrow over there to cart 'em in." Carrying more water, the boy washed the intestines. Ankle-deep in slithery mess, he wished for some of Joe's expertness. They slide and slip, he thought, whichever way you hold 'em, and you can't get 'em clean, not real clean. There's always something squeezing out of 'em somewhere. After the last squelchy handful had slid onto the barrow, he trundled away. Going past the shed, he heard Rolga whimper as she scented the load he wheeled. Bloody-handed, he set down the barrow for a rest. "You ain't having this," he said through the wall. "You been living off the best. You'd turn up your nose if I brought you in a handful." Eased for the moment, he regripped the handles and continued on his way. Past the stables stretched on a strip of bare red earth, sun-baked to concrete hardness. On it, tethered to pegs, sprawled a dozen or more dogs. At sight of the boy, they yelped excitedly and jumped to their work-hardened paws. Drooling, they leaped and swung on the end of their chains. The boy had to shout to make himself heard. "All right," he yelled. "Now just take it easy. You'll all get fed if you give me time." Hacking with one of Joe's knives, he carved off hunks of intestines. The dogs shivered when he fed them. Eagerness choked in their throats, and he had to keep chiding them. But the last one was fed before the sun finally set. Blood to the elbows and wet to the knees, he leaned on the barrow. Tiredness made him sag. Beyond the dogs he could see the sun's haze fade. "There's another day over," he thought, "and 2 more sheep are dead. A few minutes ago they were alive on the ground. Now there's part of 'em in the dogs and part of 'em hanging up. Tomorrow we'll eat 'em. People don't think about 'em like they do dogs and horses. Yet they are just the same, all living and breathing animals." The barrow felt light when he wheeled it. Going past the shed, he listened for Brolga, but she made no sound. He guessed she was sleeping, or maybe feeding her puppy. Rags liked a final drink before he slept for the night. At the pens, Joe leaned on the broom. A cigarette glowed in his mouth. The floor felt wet and cool. Joe had scrubbed it while he waited for the boy. 2 ghostly carcasses hung on a rail behind him. He took the knife from the boy and wiped it carefully. The blade scraped as he slid it into the pouch. With the boy following tiredly, he walked away from the pen. Near the bunkhouse steps, he patted the boy's shoulder. "Get clean up, son," he said, "and a swill under the tap. You'll sleep like a log till morning." His hand slid down, and he walked on around the corner. The boy stared after him, then clumped up the steps. Later, after a quick soapy wash, he hung his trousers on the window ledge. "They'll be dry," he thought, "by morning, but me boots'll stiffen. They're soaked right through to the innards." Stretched on his bunk, he relived the evening, Joe's swift-bladed knife, and the plaintive bleating sheep, the finality of death in their knowing, timid eyes. He lay for a long time before sleep closed in. Joe's words had had no understanding. Chapter 4. Centipede's Bite. On a hot, brassy morning some few days later, the boss stopped his car at the wood heap. "Hello there, son," he said. "I don't see you much. How's things going with you and your pup?" "I heard you had a good one." The boy rubbed his face. The boss was a man he seldom saw. "Yeah," he said. "He's a good un, all right, but he ain't really mine. He's Kenga's. I look after him and his mother." To hide his awe, he pulled the barrow close and began to load it. The boss prepared to leave. One hand pushed the gear lever, the other gripped the wheel. "He must be good," he said, "for Kenga to pick him. I'll drop in sometime and see him. Oh," he added, as the car began to move, "when you've got time, clean out the stalls. The nags need a change of bedding." Dust drifted across the wood heap as the car moved away. The boy straightened. A long, dusty trail feathered where the car was racing. The boss drove fast when he had to go to town. For a while the boy stood, staring, wondering what it was like to own Yambura, to own so many cattle and horses you couldn't exactly know. Still wondering, he finished loading the barrow as he wheeled it to the kitchen. Ross rode past on a horse. 5 stockmen rode with him, jostling stirrup to stirrup. Their horses shied at sight of the barrow. 3 of the men were aboriginals, coal-black and shiny, their friendly faces split in white-toothed grins. One of the white men was Steve, burly and suntanned. "Good day there, son," he called. "You might like to help tomorrow. There's a bullock to kill for the muster." He chuckled when the boy shook his head. The group rode on, clinking their stirrups. "In the kitchen," Miss Jones pointed. "Put it there," she told the boy. "I've shifted the wood box. It's more convenient than it was." Flour smothered her arms to the elbows. White daubs streaked her face. I guess it's the heat, the boy thought as he unloaded. She brushes away hair and the flour gets stuck. When the wood box was filled, he stacked more wood outside. There's enough here, he said, through the fly guy's door, to see you finish. I won't be about for an hour or two. I've got to clean the stalls and put down fresh bedding. He upended the empty barrow and leaned it against the wall. Miss Jones looked around. Mounds of bright crusted bread steamed on the table. Over their long upended shapes, her face glowed, streakily flushed. "All right," she said with a smile. "I shan't want all that more, though I'm double baking today. Would you like a crust before you go, and maybe a mug of tea? There's some in the pot." The boy rubbed his ear. "Well," he said, and opened the door. "If it ain't any trouble, a crust'd be good. A feller gets hungry doing odd jobs." He let the door close gently, easing it onto its catch. Legs outstretched, he sat on the wood box. Miss Jones cut a crust, then spread it thickly with butter. The boy saw it turn to warm golden grease. It dribbled when he ate. "Core," he mumbled, "the bread's good. You can taste it better hot." Miss Jones poured tea, a cup for herself, a mug for the boy. "Yes," she agreed. "Most people think so, though I wouldn't eat it myself. It gives me indigestion." The boy gulped tea and crust together. A trickle of butter dripped onto his shirt front. He held the mug so that his arm covered the grease spots. "Yeah," he said, "I suppose it might. The bread balls up and sorta thickens, though I've got to admit I like it myself." He chewed the final piece, making it last in his mouth. The crust had a rich, nutty flavor. Miss Jones sipped her tea. The boy saw her smile, though her face was in the shadows. "Sitting like this," he thought, "you can smell the bread and everything else she cooks. The place outside seems a long way away." He set down his mug and stood up. "Thanks, Miss Jones. It sure was good. I can still taste the bread in me teeth." He turned as he finished and opened the door. His eyes blinked against the glare. Near the shed he whistled softly, trilling the notes through his teeth. Brolga, followed by Rags, padded hurriedly from inside the doorway and came to meet him. The boy made them come to heel before he continued. On to the stables. "We'll do it proper," he told them, "and none of this racing about. Old Kanga can't say I ain't handled you right." Broga obeyed, but the pup went berserk. Yapping and happy, he raced around until the boy caught him. "Now listen," the boy added. "You heard what I said. Walk quietly by your mum and stay there." The pup sneezed when freed, then snuffled in close to Broga. The three walked on to the stables. The stalls were empty. Powder and Patches dozed under a tree in the horse yards. At sight of the boy, they bucked and capered. Powder stood on his hind legs, while Patches bucked in circles. The boy watched absorbedly. "You beauts," he told them. "Some day I'll have one, just like the pair of you." A pat on the shoulder made him turn, while Rima and Aboriginal stood close behind. "Core," the boy said, "I never heard ye." Warima grinned. Sweat gleamed on his dark, pitted skin. "I come," he said, with a chuckle, "on feet without boots. No hear 'em sound, or hush hush." His spare black body leaned side by side with the boy's. They both peered through the rails. "I'm good fellow ors," Waharima grunted. "Good fellow ors too much. You ride 'em sometime?" After the question, he turned to spit. The boy smelt his strong, bitter sweat. The boy shook his head. "No," he said, "I've never learned. I ain't been here that long. Besides, they're the bosses. He never lets anyone ride 'em." while Rima wiped his mouth. Spittle shone on the back of his hand as he rested it on the rail. Heavy-browed, he pursed his lips when he said, "I'm good fellow too. Some day I'ma let you. Me talk come for teach you." Suddenly the spittled hand touched the boy's. "Me go now, by and by come back," and he moved away, striding along the fence. The boy stared after him. "Hey," he called, "why ain't you working? All the men rode out this morning." Orima paused. His tall, oiled body glistened above its loincloth. "Me walk about," he whispered, yet the words carried. His voice hissed, gutturally toned. "By and by, maybe 2-3 weeks, come back. So long now, see you sometime." His long legs strode, and he seemed to glide. Next moment he disappeared, hidden by the blacksmith's shop. The boy rubbed his neck. Rags crawled between his feet, searching for shade. He picked up the pup, then beckoned Broga. "Come on," he told her. "We'll push on quickly. It's too hot here for your pup." Inside the stalls, he stripped to the waist. Bare-chested, he let his shirt hang down outside his trousers and rummaged for a fork. With the long, smooth handle sliding smoothly through his hands, he raked old bedding into heaps. While he worked, Broga prowled about the building. The pup slept. When the last of the bedding was heaped, he pronged big forkfuls up above his head and carried them outside. The stalls looked bare when he finished. Satisfied with the job for the moment, he stretched flat-backed on a bale. Broga came to lie near. "We'll have a spell," he said to her, "then spread some new stuff. It'll look good when we finish." Lulled by the warm quietness, he dozed into sleep. It was noon when he yawned, wakened by Broga's coughing growl. Powder and Patches had their heads poked under the shutters. Their nibbling lips tried to reach a manger. The boy scratched his back. Corey mumbled, "You gave me a fright. I thought someone was coming." Still yawning, he forked hay to the horses, then broke open several bales of straw. Hugging armfuls against his chest, he tramped around the stalls, spreading it by hand. To finish the job neatly, he raked lightly with the fork until the new straw lay yellow and level. His shirt sleeves dragged as he walked out through the doorway and stood the fork against the wall. "That's that," he said, "and another job over. Must be close to dinner time." He pulled up his shirt around his shoulders before slipping into the sleeves. Broga stood nearby while he eased the shirt slowly. When it fitted, he unbuckled his belt to retuck the folds into his trousers. Contentedly, he pushed down the shirt tails, then retightened his belt. Suddenly, he groaned. Sweat oozed through his freckles. "Oh," he gasped, and ripped the shirt away again. A huge centipede fell wriggling to the ground, doubled over the boy, swiveled around in agony, gripping his arm. The centipede had bitten just above his elbow. Not understanding, Broga cocked her head and watched. The centipede wriggled past her, but she took no notice. Rags followed, sniffing its squirming antics. For minutes the boy sweated. Pain made him cringe until he fell against the wall. Groveling to stand, he clawed at the rough timber. "Oh," he choked, "you wouldn't believe it. 1 minute you're right, then this." His arm felt tight when he pulled himself upright, and he had to grip one-handed. On his feet, he staggered toward the shed. Broga trailed behind, whimpering to her pup. She sensed the boy's agony and crept belly close to the dust. In the shed, the boy crouched on his knees and tried to think clearly. "I've never heard," he thought, "whether they can kill you. In fact, that's the first I've seen. I'd better wait and see how it goes. Miss Jones be scared if she sees me." Eyes closed and pressed against his trousers, he had to brace to stop from crying. When a long dark shadow stretched into the room, his head was still lowered. Kanga stood in the doorway, looking down. He rubbed his chin and said, "You pick a time for sleeping. It ain't much afternoon." Dazed, the boy looked up. "Kanga," he whispered, "I thought you'd be out for weeks yet." Kanga slid his hand down until it hooked on his belt. He glanced at the boy, then looked beyond him. Brolga and the pup slunk under the bin. "I came in for flour," Kanga said. "The sack I had got spoiled, and a man needs it." Then his piercing eyes stared down. "You're crook, son," he added. "What's wrong with you? You look as if you'd been stunned." The boy nodded, his teeth almost clenched when he admitted, "Yeah, I'm crook all right. A wriggler bit me. You can see it here on my arm." He half raised the arm, then let it drop. Pain seared across his shoulders. Kanga lifted the arm to feel around the bite with his fingers. The boy felt their touch press lightly on his skin. As the old man lowered the arm, he straightened. "It's gone in deep," he said, "but they ain't deadly. I'll ease it when I come back." His battered hat brushed as he went through the doorway. When Kanga returned, the boy looked up. A fresh twinge of pain made him wince. In Kanga's hand he saw a small, bright knife. The other hand held an onion. Carefully, the old man struck a match and held it under the knife blade. "It'll just make a nick," he told the boy. "Then strap on the onion. The pain'll go in a minute." Kanga pressed away the skin until the bite showed as two tiny pricks. While the boy gripped his knees, Kanga slit each mark, then sucked them with his mouth, spitting out blood each time his mouth filled. When he judged it sufficient, he cut the onion in two and held half flat side down, pressed against the cuts. With a bandage pulled from his pocket, he strapped the onion to the boy's arm. He grunted, standing up. "That ain't too bad. I reckon you're glad it's over." The boy gulped. "Yeah," he said, "I'm glad all right. But the pain's starting to go. I can feel it getting easier. Thanks, Kanga. Thanks a lot. I'd have been stuck without you." He scrambled to his feet and began to struggle into his shirt. Kanga helped. The boy moved stiffly, sliding his arms down the sleeves. "I put it on once," he told Kanga, then ripped it off. "You wouldn't believe how it hurt." Kanga eased a sleeve over the bandage, then threw away the unused half onion. The boy heard it drop outside. "Yeah," Kanga said, "I know how it is. You feel you can't stand it." With the boy behind him, he went out into the sun glare. Passing the wood heap, he asked, "Have you had dinner? I just rode in myself." The boy took a stride to reach Kanga's side. Together they walked under the peppercorns. "No," he said, "I ain't all that hungry. I was nearly sick when you nicked me." His arm ached when he bent the elbow, but he sighed with relief. The fierce biting pain had gone. Kanga heard the sigh and looked down. "Get something in ya," he told the boy, "and you'll be all right. The onion'll draw out all the poison." Close to the kitchen, the boy glanced up. Kanga had already swerved to go on toward the store. It lay to the rear, behind the homestead. "How about you?" the boy asked. "Ain't you having dinner?" "Well, will I tell Miss Jones you're in?" Kanga shook his head. His gaunt, seamed face held no expression. "I'll push on," he said, "when I've got the flour. There's 20-odd miles between me and Mulba." The boy nodded, head bent for a moment. He noticed Kanga's trousers. The legs were soaked with horse sweat. "He rides," he thought, "and rides and rides. He's never still. You see him for a minute, then he's gone. I suppose he's left his dogs at Mulba." Aloud, he said, "I'll go in, then, and get some tucker. Miss Jones will be waiting." He pushed the door as he said it. Kanga rolled on his boot heels, going around the corner. Inside, the boy sat with his body half turned. He let his bandaged arm hook over the chair back. Busy at the stove, Miss Jones looked around. "You're late," she scolded. "Where on earth have you been? I've kept your dinner waiting." And she pulled a plate from the oven to cover it with gravy. The heaped baked dinner steamed. Hunched awkwardly, the boy wondered what to say. "If I tell her," he thought, "there a centipede bit me, there'll be a fuss. She'll be worrying around in circles. The best thing to do is make an excuse." "Ah," he mumbled, "I'm sorry, Miss Jones, but I got hung up at the stables. Couldn't find the straw the boss wanted spread." "Couldn't find the straw?" Miss Jones set down the plate. "I should think there was plenty in those great big stables. I've seen it there myself." She watched the boy while he fumbled for knife and fork. He sensed her eyes following every movement. "Yeah," he told her, "but you know how it is. It's finding the right straw. The boss likes it fresh and yellow." A twinge racked his arm, but he kept his face straight. Miss Jones still stared. She exclaimed. "What difference is the color?" She leaned over the table to straighten the cloth. Her aproned waist almost touched the boy. "Moo," he thought, "if she comes any closer, she'll bump my elbow. Then I'll jump right out of this chair." He edged away as he said, "There ain't no difference, but you have to do the things right. If he wants yellow, you have to find yellow." He put such emphasis, the words sounded convincing. He nearly believed them himself. Miss Jones walked to the dresser and cut a melon pie. She set a piece on the plate before she spoke again. "It seems strange to me. I can't see the sense in it." Her hands busied covering the pie with a gauze cloth. Then, drenching the cut portion with cream, she placed it near the boy. He ate slowly, using knife and fork carefully. "Yeah," he said, "but there it is. I have to do as I'm told." He felt ashamed as he said it. "I'm wrong," he thought, "to tell her lies. And if this goes on, I'll get in deeper and deeper. Yet, what can you do?" Intent on his dinner, he half shrugged. The movement made him wince. Miss Jones saw the twinge crease his face. "What's the matter?" she asked, and leaned forward. "Aren't you well, or is it your dinner?" The boy shook his head. "No," he mumbled, "I'm right. And the dinner's fine, but I got to eat quick. Old Kanga came in, and I want to see him. You never know, he might take the pup, or maybe Broga." The thought came as an inspiration. He pushed away his plate and reached for the pie and cream. Miss Jones stood up, relieved. "Oh, I see," she said with a smile. "Is that what's worrying you?" She walked to the sink to start washing dishes. The boy spooned pie and cream from the plate. He was on the way to the door when he said, "Yeah, but you never know. You have to be on the safe side." Outside, he wiped his mouth, then headed for the shed. "Phew," he thought, "that was getting close. A little bit longer and she'd have had me." His arm felt easier as he entered the shed. Broga came to meet him, followed by her pup. They both licked his hands, and he suddenly remembered. "Hor," he said, "I forgot the pair of you. Forgot your scraps and meat. And I even forgot the crust you promised me." Hunkered against the wall, he rubbed their ears. Rags sprawled on his boots to sleep.